Hello everyone and welcome back. There are so many scary urban legends from Japan. The country has a rich history of ghost stories. I have for you 11 Japanese urban legends that are so scary you cannot even speak them aloud without becoming cursed. So grab your flashlight and follow me into the darkness of Japan. Number 1. Am I pretty? If this question comes from the mouth of a young Japanese woman hidden by a surgical mask, then it is probably the evil spirit called Kuchisake Onna. Be very careful how you respond, or you may also wind up slashed from ear to ear, or worse. Kuchisake Onna means slit-mouthed woman, and she is a frightening Japanese urban legend that has appeared in many pop culture media. If it is indeed Kuchisake Onna wishing to know if you think she is beautiful, then it would be the best to answer. According to the legend, there is no actual correct or incorrect answer, a positive response, and she would remove the mask to display a horrible scar running deeply on both cheeks and stretching to either ear. Then she would ask the same question again, with the added effect of a sharp pair of scissors demanding a quick reply. A second positive answer and Kuchisake Onna will only slice the face of her victim. If you are honest and say no, the retaliation would be even more extreme than just carving up a face. Taking the accepted legend as gospel, saying no to this woman would be something not far off a suicide attempt. Kuchisake certainly doesn't want to hear that she is not pretty, as she would then immediately lop off your head or cut your whole body in half without a second thought. Clearly, any answer will lead to some misfortune. You may try to run, but it will be in vain. Any direction you turn, she will appear, over and over again. There is no easy escape from Kuchisake. However, the legend says that there is a way. When she asks, "Am I pretty?" simply respond with a neutral or confusing answer such as average or possibly, and Kuchisake will ponder that reply for a second or two. Use that moment to escape the encounter and don't look back. You may also try throwing her hand candies or fruit, and she will stop to pick up the treats to give you enough time to run. Like all these legends, there is some basis in fact. The most popular inspiration for this woman is the wife of a fearsome samurai warrior from the Japanese Heian period, roughly 800 to 1100 years ago. According to reports, this woman was very beautiful and more than welcomed the attention from any man prepared to offer it. She was often heard to ask men to rate her appearance in the similar way to Kuchisake. Somehow, the samurai found out that she was cheating on him. After he sliced her face, opening the shape of a wide smile, he posed a question of his own. Who will think you're beautiful now? Not long afterwards, the unfortunate woman died. She became the vengeful spirit now known as Kuchisake Onna. This is not the only origin story though. More modern takes on the legend believe that Kuchisake was disfigured in other ways. Her wound may have been a direct result of a car crash, or perhaps she was in a lunatic asylum, got bored one day, and decided to carve up her own face before escaping the institution and stalking school children on their way home. In 1979, panic hit fever pitch in Japan when reports of a woman was seen to be following young children. Many schools closed during the threat, and reactional parks that often resounded by the laughter of the young fell silent. Most children heeded the warnings to remain indoors, and only a few hardly young souls dared to venture outside. It is said that during one possible abduction attempt, the woman was struck by a car and killed. A coroner's report included one injury, a torn mouth. Kuchisake is not exclusive to Japan. In 2004, reports from South Korea mentioned something about a woman in a blood-red mask hunting for children. Number 2. The School at Night is a scary Japanese urban legend about schools that are supposed to be haunted because they were built on top of old cemeteries. They call it Gaku no Gaiden, or school ghost stories. These urban legends are also sometimes known as the 7 wonders of the school. Years ago, in Japan, there was an urgent need for new schools. There were rumors that the government needed to find cheap land on which they could build the schools, so they built them on the sites of old cemeteries. This gave rise to rumors and gossip among kids that their schools were haunted. They say that if you go to your school at midnight, you will see and hear many strange things, like a candle floating across the school grounds, disembodied footsteps echoing down the hallways, and statues with eyes that follow you as you pass by. In the science room, the anatomical skeleton comes alive. You hear the sound of an invisible ball bouncing in the gym, and you might even see a ghostly, severed head flying around the classrooms. If you walk across the schoolyard, ghostly hands will emerge from below and try to drag you down. If you dig on the school grounds, you will unearth headstones and tombs. If you go swimming in the pool, ghostly hands will grab your legs and try to drown you. All the buildings appear on the school grounds, and there are staircases that lead to nowhere. If you walk up them, you will disappear. They say that one stall in the toilets is haunted, and if you ever enter it, a rope will fall from the ceiling in the shape of a noose. In one small town in Japan, there was a group of teenage boys who had heard rumors about their school. According to the legend, if you went to the school at midnight on the 15th day of the month, strange things would happen. There was a statue that stood on the path leading up to the school, and its eyes would supposedly follow you as you passed by. If you walked up the main stairs, the number of steps would be different when you walked back down. If you turned on the taps in the science laboratory, blood would come flowing out instead of water. And if anyone dared to enter the last stall in the toilet, that person would never be seen alive again. The boys decided to go to the school at night to test if the legends were true or if they're just stories. On the 15th day of the month, they sneaked out of their houses and met up at exactly midnight. There were 4 of them all together: Takashi, Hiro, Mikyo, Shinichi. As they walked through the school gates and up the path, the boys stared at the statue, waiting for something to happen. The eyes of the statue were looking to the left, and even as the boys passed by, the eyes did not move an inch. "So much for that stupid legend," one of the boys chuckled. They entered the school building and cautiously walked up the stairs, counting each step: 1, 2, 3. There were 13 steps in total. When they walked back down, there were still 13 steps. "Another old wives' tale," said one of the boys. They made their way down the corridor to the science laboratory and turned on all the taps. Instead of blood, all that came gushing out was water. They let out a disappointed sigh. "I knew it," said one of the boys. "We came here in vain." They decided to test out one more legend before they went home and went to the toilets on the ground floor. However, when they came to the door of the toilets, a few of the boys lost their nerve. Although they had talked excitedly about it, none of them seemed in any hurry to enter the haunted store. Finally, one boy stepped forward and told the others he was not afraid of anything. He pushed open the door and went into the toilet while his friends waited outside. The boys looked at the clock. It was exactly 1 a.m. A minute later, he came out. "Nothing," he said. "It's all just a bunch of kids' stories and fairy tales." The boys all laughed and walked away. When they came out of the school, they walked back down the path. Before leaving, they took one last look at the statue, but its eyes were still looking to the left. "What a letdown," one of the boys whispered. The next morning, each of the boys received a worried phone call from one of the boys' mother. "Was my son with you last night?" she demanded. "He wasn't there when I checked his room this morning. He sneaked out and he still hasn't come home. Where is he?" The boys felt something was wrong. In the end, they decided to tell their parents about the little trip that they had taken the night before. Their parents contacted the school principal, and soon the adults, the kids, and the principal were gathering outside the school. "What are you saying?" the school principal asked. "You're talking the statue outside the school?" "The eyes of the statue have always looked to the right." "But when we were here last night, they were looking to the left," one of the boys exclaimed. Entering the gate, they were all shocked to see that the eyes of the statue were indeed looking to the right. "But what about the steps on the main staircase?" one of the boys cried. They all quickly ran to the staircase and counted the steps. 1, 2, 3, 12? "Yes," said the school principal. "The staircase has always had 12 steps. When it was being built, the architects made a mistake in the design. It was supposed to have 13 steps." "That's impossible," one of the boys shouted. "But what about the tops in the lab?" Entering the science laboratory, they all looked at the sinks. Each one was caked with a dark red stain. The boys were numb with fear. But what about my friend?" one of the boys mumbled. "He went into the toilet." "Let's go and see," said the school principal in a grave voice. They all gathered outside the toilets. The boys and their parents looked at each other nervously. The principal took a deep breath, reached out and pushed the door open. The boy's mother let out a blood-curdling scream and fainted. The others recoiled in horror, and some of them could not help vomiting all over the floor. The dead body of their friend was hanging from the ceiling with the rope wrapped around his neck. His face was deathly pale, and his eyes were wide open, frozen in a look of horror. His throat has been cut from ear to ear, and all of the blood had drained out of his body, covering the floor in a pool of dark red. His internal organs and intestines had been removed. They were sitting in a neat pile in the toilet. One of the boys was in a daze. He was staring, unblinking, at the watch of his friend's wrist. It had stopped at exactly 1 a.m. Number 3. Teka Teka is a scary Japanese urban legend about a girl who fell under a train and was cut in half. She took a long time to die, and now her ghost roams through Japan, dragging her top half along, using her claw-like hands. Every time she moves, she makes a Teka Teka sound. There is a story about a young boy who was leaving his school one evening when he heard a noise behind him. Looking back, he saw a beautiful girl sitting at a window. The girl had her arms propped up on the window, and she was just staring at him. He wondered why she was there, because it was an all-boys school. When she saw him looking back at her, the girl smiled and hugged herself so that she was holding her elbows. Then, suddenly, she leaped out of the window and landed on the ground outside. The boy realized with horror that she was missing the lower half of her body. She made her way towards him, clawing along the ground and running on her elbows, making a teka teka sound. The boy was filled with terror and revulsion. He tried to run, but he was frozen to the spot. Within seconds, she was upon him, and she cut him in half, making him into one of her own. When kids tell this story, they warn each other about Teka Teka. They say she carries a sharp saw, and if she catches you, she'll cut you in half and you'll become just like her. She is said to chase children who play at dusk. She is also known as bata bata, again, the sound of it running on its elbows, or the girl that runs on her elbows. Number 4. Red Cloak, aka manto, also known as Red Vest or Red Cape, is a Japanese ghost who haunts the girls' bathroom. He appears wearing a red cloak and a white mask, and it is said to be so charming that girls are unable to resist him. Red Cloak hides in the last stall of the girls' toilet, and when you enter, he steps out and asks, "Which do you prefer, red cloak or blue cloak?" If you say red, he slits your throat or chops off your head, and the blood flows down your back, making it look like you're wearing a red cloak. If you say blue, he grabs you by the neck and chokes you until your face turns blue and you die of suffocation. Don't even think about asking for a third color. If you do, the floor will open up beneath you and pale white hands will reach up and drag you down to hell. One school ghost story tells of a young girl who heard a voice coming from the toilet next to her, saying, "Shall we put on the red vest?" She got scared and ran away with her jeans around her ankles. She told her teacher what she had heard, and the police were called. A policewoman went into the bathroom while her male partner waited outside. She heard the same voice asking, "Shall we put on the red vest?" The policeman, listening at the door, heard her answer, "Okay, put it on." Suddenly, a loud scream was heard, followed by a thump. When the partner opened the bathroom door, he found the policewoman lying dead on the floor. Her head had been cut off, and the blood on her clothes made it look like she was wearing a red vest. In Japanese, the murderer's ghost is known variously as akamanto or akahanden. Some people say that years ago, Red Cloak was a young man who was so handsome that every girl immediately fell in love with him. He was so awesomely beautiful that girls would faint whenever he looked at them. His beauty was so overwhelming that he had to hide his face behind a white mask. At some point, he kidnapped a beautiful young girl and she was never seen again. In another version of the story, he is called Red Cape. He lurks into the toilets and asks you if you want a red cape. If you say yes, he rips off your top and tears the skin of your back. In yet another version of the legend, he is called Red Paper, Blue Paper. Girls who go into the bathroom hear a voice coming from the lost stall. It asks, "Do you want red paper or blue paper?" To answer red means a bloody death by being skinned alive. To answer blue means you have all your blood drained out of your body. Still more versions involve a bloody hand emerging from the toilet and trying to pull you in, blood raining down from the ceiling, being drowned in blood, and having disembodied white hands grabbing you and choking you to death. Number 5. Sadako Yamamura is the ghost girl from the Ring movies who appears in a cursed videotape. Her story was based on a real girl named Sadako, who was a psychic and lived in Japan in the early 19s. Her psychic ability was that she was able to project words and images onto film. When Sadako was a young girl, she was very melancholy and depressed. She seldom spoke and never played with other children, spending all of her time alone. Sadako's mother was a psychic, and she conducted several experiments with a psychic researcher named Fukurai. When the doctor published the results of his experiments, other scientists accused Sadako's mother of being a fraud and said she faked her psychic abilities. Sadako's mother was so distraught by all of the criticism that she committed suicide. Sadako was devastated by her mother's death and lived with her father on a remote island. As she grew older, she began to develop psychic powers of her own. When her father learned of her psychic powers, he brought her to Dr. Fukurai in Tokyo. The doctor forced Sadako to participate in many experiments that involved using her mind to make words and images appear on photographic film. In Japan, they call this nensa, which means thought photography or thophotography. Sadako produced a number of these thought photographs and nobody could explain how it was done. Dr. Fukurai wanted to publish another book, but remembering what had happened to her mother, Sadako refused. She told him she was going to leave and would never return. Nobody knows for sure what happened after all. Some people believe that the doctor murdered Sadako. They say he lured her out of the woods near the hospital and strangled her. Then he threw her body down a nearby well and sealed it with large rocks to keep her hidden forever. However, Sadako was not really dead. When she woke up, she was trapped in the well and could not get out. She attempted to escape by scaling the walls, but failed every time, breaking off her nails and fingertips in the process. The poor girl survived in the well for 7 days before she finally died with her heart full of hate. With her last breath, she vowed to have her revenge on the world. Sadako's rage and terror and the manner in which she died combined with her psychic powers to create a terrible curse. This resulted in a series of inexplicable images being projected onto a mysterious unmarked videotape. Sadako appears in the videotape as a shadowy young woman dressed in a white gown. Her face is covered by long black hair. They say that if you watch the video, you will die in 7 days. The only way to avoid the curse is to make a copy of the videotape and give it to somebody else. Number 6. The Red Room is a scary Japanese urban legend about a pop-up that appears when you are surfing the internet. They say that if you close it, you will die. There was a boy who was addicted to the internet. He heard an urban legend about the Red Room from one of his friends at school. That evening, when the boy got home, he went on the internet to see if he could find out anything more about it. All of a sudden, a small window popped up with a red background. Written in black was the message, "Do you like?" The boy closed the window, but it popped up again. He tried numerous times to close it, but it just kept reappearing. Eventually, the boy noticed that the question had changed. Now it read, "Do you like the Red Room?" And in the background, a childlike voice said, "Do you like the Red Room?" Just then, the screen went black and a list of names appeared in red. At the bottom of the list, the boy saw the name of his friend, the friend who told him about the Red Room. All of a sudden, the boy became aware of something behind him and he lost consciousness. The next day, the boy didn't turn up to school. There was a rumor going around that something had happened to him. The next day, his classmates heard the horrible news. The boy had committed suicide, painting his room red with his own blood. Number 7. The Cowhead Story is a Japanese urban legend about a scary story that is considered the scariest horror story ever written. It is supposed to be so terrifying that you will die of fright after hearing it. According to legend, a horrific short story called Cowhead was discovered in Japan in the 17th century. The actual origin of the story is still shrouded in mystery. Several written accounts from this era make reference to the awful story, but they only mention its title and describe it as a tale too terrible to tell. Rumors state that upon hearing the dreadful tale, listeners were overcome with a terror so great that they trembled violently for days until they finally died from fright. The Cowhead Story was deemed too dangerous, and most existing copies of it were burnt years ago. The few copies that survived were cut into sections and distributed across the country. Today, it is believed that only fragments of the original story remain in existence. Most of the actual details of the story remain unknown to this day. The unfortunate people who read the story never lived long enough to repeat it. One recent rumor tells of an elementary school teacher who inexplicably came into possession of some fragments of the original Cowhead Story. According to the rumor, the teacher was taking his class on a school trip. He was in the habit of entertaining the students on the bus with ghost stories. After some time, the teacher announced he would tell them the legendary forbidden tale called Cowhead. Before he could finish the first sentence of the story, however, the children began to panic. "Stop!" they cried. "Don't tell us." One child turned pale and covered his ears, and the others began to scream. But the teacher refused to stop. They say his eyes went black and he proceeded with the story as if some unseen force had taken over his mind. Almost an hour later, the teacher regained his senses and found that the bus had crashed into a ditch. The students had all fainted and were frothing at the mouth. The bus driver lay slumped over the wheel, sweating and shivering. It is unclear what happened next, except that the teacher never told the Cowhead Story again. Number 8. The story of the Okiku doll starts in 1918 when a 17-year-old boy purchased a doll for his 2-year-old sister Okiku as a souvenir while visiting Sapporo on the Japanese island of Hokkaido for a marine exhibition. The doll itself was around 16 inches tall and clad in a traditional Japanese kimono. Its eyes are black beads set within the lifelike porcelain white face, and the black hair in a traditional style cut shoulder length. The boy immediately knew his sister would love it and bought it right away. The overjoyed little girl was so happy with the doll and played with it every day, even going so far as to name it after herself, Okiku. The two were inseparable and went everywhere together until tragedy struck the following year and Okiku fell gravely ill. The girl soon died from complications or severe influenza and fever, and the family placed her beloved doll in a family altar in memory of their daughter. Not long after the heartbroken family placed the doll in the altar, they noticed something odd. The jet black hair of the doll, which had originally been cropped to about shoulder length, and with neat ends in the traditional style, started getting longer day by day, and the ends of the hair became random in length, in contrast to the straight cut it had had previously. The hair had grown all the way down to brush against the doll's knees, which caused the rather alarmed family to conclude that Okiku's spirit had somehow inhabited the doll. Even when the doll's hair was trimmed, it soon grew back, inexplicably, and always stopped at around knee length. In 1938, the Suzuki family moved to Sakhalin, but was wary of taking the mysterious doll with them. Since they believed that their daughter's spirit resided within the doll, they were unwilling to discard it, and so they instead brought it to a temple in the town of Hokkaido, Japan. The family explained the doll's unusual qualities to the priest of the temple. Yet, he accepted it anyway, and soon was able to say for himself that indeed the doll's hair continued to grow. Trimming the hair became a regular chore at the temple, and soon pictures of the doll with hair of various lengths were adorning the shrine where it was kept. To this day, the doll remains to this temple, housed within a modest wooden box, and its hair continues to grow no matter how often it is trimmed. It is unclear what is going on with the growing hair of the Okiku doll. No one has really been able to explain how it has kept growing continuously for the better part of a century. Samples of the Okiku's doll have been taken and analyzed in the past, and it was determined that the hair was indeed human. For now, anyone who wishes to take a look at the Okiku doll can see it on display at Manenji Temple. It continues to stand in its box as it always has, wearing its kimono, growing its hair, and staring out at visitors with its beady black eyes, perhaps even watching them right back. Number 9. The Himura Mansion is a Japanese urban legend about the dark history of a haunted house and the horrible murders of the entire family who lived there. They say that the video game Fatal Frame was based on a true story. Eager to solve the mystery, many people have scoured maps trying to find the real location of Himura Mansion. According to the legend, the Himura Mansion is a large traditional Japanese house that is located in a rocky area somewhere in the outskirts of Tokyo. The mansion became famous for being the site of the worst mass murder in the history of Japan. The Himura family were said to have practiced ancient and forgotten Shinto rituals that had long ago outlawed in Japan. One of these occult rituals was called the Strangling Ritual, and involved the sacrificial murder of a young girl. The purpose of this gruesome ritual was to protect the Himura family from bad karma, which they believed would emerge from a portal in the mansion's courtyard. This strangling ritual had to be performed every 50 years to prevent the bad karma from destroying the family. They would select a baby girl from within the family and raise her in secret. They called her the Rope Shrine Maiden. The girl had to be kept away from the rest of the world in complete isolation, or else the ritual would not work. When the time came for the ritual to be performed, they dragged her out to a shrine in the courtyard and tied ropes around her neck, her arms, and her legs. Next, they would pull the ropes in different locations, tearing the young girl's body apart. The blood-stained ropes were then placed over a portal in the mansion's courtyard, sealing the getaway. If the ritual was a success, it would keep the bad karma away for another half-century until the ritual had to be repeated. For generations, this tradition was passed down through the Himura family. However, during the preparations for the last recorded ritual, something went wrong. The Rope Shrine Maiden fell in love with a young boy she saw from the window of the mansion. This was a disaster because she was supposed to remain pure and free from worldly influences. Her blood and spirit were tainted, and when she was sacrificed, the ritual failed miserably because she was no longer pure. Upon learning of the maiden's love, the head of the Himura family became distraught. He was responsible for the ensuring that the ritual was a success. Fearing that disaster would now befall the family, he went on an insane rampage throughout the mansion. He brutally murdered the entire Himura family with his traditional Japanese sword, the katana. The head of the family believed that by killing them, he was saving them from certain doom. When every person in the mansion lay dead, he fell upon his own katana, committing suicide. The local people in the neighboring village kept quiet about the story of Himura Mansion for decades. Ever since then, a variety of weird happenings or inexplicable phenomenon taking place on the property. Bloody handprints and large red stains have been found splattered all over the walls inside. Ghostly apparitions have been seen both at night and in broad daylight. As legend would have it, these are the ghosts of the murdered family members. It is said that they will attempt to repeat the failed ritual using whoever is daring to enter the abandoned building. People who enter the house are occasionally found dead with rope marks on their arms and legs, indicating that they had been bound and pulled. Others have been found torn to pieces in the underground network of tunnels that lie underneath the mansion. Nobody knows who made these tunnels or what purpose they served, but stories suggest that they were involved in the strangling ritual. There's also a certain window in the house that has become infamous. They say that if you take a photo of this window, the ghostly image of a young girl in a kimono will appear in the developed photograph. These incidents have provoked fear in the people of Tokyo, and many believe that those who venture near this area will become cursed. The deaths of 7 people on the property are unexplainable to this day. The urban legend of the Himura Mansion became popular in the West when the Japanese video game Fatal Frame was released in English. Ghost stories about the haunted house blew into a worldwide craze. If the legends are true, the Himura Mansion is definitely one of the most haunted houses in Japan. Number 10. In 1919, Seijo Yasuo published a collection of poetry that included a poem called Tomino's Hell. It describes a young boy's experience in hell after committing unspeakable acts. The poem is already pretty creepy, but the legend that surrounds it is even worse. It is said that if you read the poem, you must read it on your own head and never read it aloud. If you read the poem out loud, it causes disaster and sometimes even death. I have found the translation of Tomino's Hell, but I am not going to read it to you for obvious reasons. Number 11. A popular Japanese urban legend is the existence of human pullers, people that were deliberately buried alive inside of construction sites. These started from Japan, and it is known as human pillar. This legend has been around since ancient times, and it is based on something odd that people believed. They believed that a human sacrifice sealed inside of a structure would make a foundation more stable and durable after construction. In other words, if a human was buried alive under or near the building, it would make the building stronger. By doing this sacrifice, they thought that the gods would be happy with it and let the building be safe from natural disasters. Back then, working conditions on many Japanese building sites were known to be very poor, and many men would perish from disease and exhaustion while on the job. These unfortunate men would then be buried near the building to hide what had happened and to ensure the foundation would stand for decades to come. It has also been suggested that some laborers were killed during construction of castles as a security measure so that the secrets of the building could not get out to the public. Because of this, it is believed that buildings with human pillars are haunted by the people that were killed in the construction. After all, many of them had horrible deaths, which can provoke a spirit even more. A famous story with this legend is the history of Matsue Castle. Built during the 17th century, the stone wall of the central tower would repeatedly fall after construction. So naturally, the builders were convinced that their only option was to sacrifice a human for the main pillar. They found a beautiful maiden dancing at the local bone festival and tricked her into coming with them. As soon as she was out of sight, the builders sealed her alive within the castle walls. Legend says that her spirit haunts the castle, and supposedly whenever a woman dances in the streets of Matsue, the walls of the castle will shake violently. Soon after this became popular, a law was passed prohibiting dancing in public places. And this isn't the only place well known for human pillars, so if you happen to go to Japan at all and don't know what to do, you can always look at the dark side of Japan's history and visit a human pillar. Hello there, and thank you so much for listening. If you liked this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel. I would also love to hear your thoughts about what my next video should be. So, if you have any ideas for future videos, leave me a comment below, and I will see you all in my next video.